Welcome to Become an Idol. I'm Dr. Robin Sargent, owner of Idol Courses. This is the place where newbies come to learn and veterans share their knowledge. I have here with me today Zsolt Olah, and you probably, if you follow anyone in instructional design or e-learning on LinkedIn, or if you're in the instructional designer Facebook group, you have seen this name. Or if you read articles at the e-learning industry blog place, then you have seen his work and you've probably seen his posts. And so the reason why I have invited him today is because he is writing an in-depth article on basically just getting into instructional design and what all that means and the different titles and how you make the transition. And so I know through his research, he has got some great information to share with us. But before we get into that, Joel, will you please introduce yourself better than I just did?
No, it was perfect introduction, short, sweet. All you need to know about me is there. So my name is Zsolt Olah, and those of you who are you go to Starbucks, you introduce yourself, you get your name, and they're really proud of themselves that they write your name on it. So whenever I go to Starbucks, I get like Fred, Z, all kinds of things. I just call myself something else every time I walk in. Originally from Hungary, and so this is what the Z, S, and Zsolt sound comes in. And if I have to introduce myself quickly, I would say that I have two lives. One is the engineering and programming and kind of like a techie person. I do have an engineering degree, programming, fiddle with machine learning, that sort of thing when I graduated. And then I decided that I liked people. So I went to all the way to the side and did instructional design, learning and teaching. And so ever since, and it was a long time ago, ever since there was always projects somewhere in between. So I utterly can confuse people on the phone because I can talk to an engineer down to the code level and then switch to a high level design, needs assessment, that sort of thing. So I enjoy this like in between world that's usually occupied by either IT or instructional designers. So that's kind of like, I think, a quick intro for me. And if you've seen me, you probably seen me at conferences that I speak, mostly about engagement, gamification, and lately about how to use data to tell stories within instructional design.
Oh my gosh. Well, you just gave me a whole list of things to invite you back for. So, one of the things that we just love to hear, especially from our veterans, is how did you become an idol? Or you said that you got into instructional design many moons ago. So, how long ago and how did you make that transition?
So my first degree back in Hungary when I grew up, it was before the whole world collapsed, and we had this Iron Curtain and all that. So there was the time, exciting time when I turned 18, when all these things suddenly opened up and the West came in and that sort of thing. It was an exciting time. It was also an exciting time for learning something brand new that was 25, 30 years ago or so. And one interesting thing is that when I finished, I learned programming, so C++ and JavaScript and everything that I do now, I learned like 20 something years ago, and obviously I kept it up. But that's kind of the starting point with engineering and computers. And after that, when I finished, I got my degree. I decided that I like people. I don't want to sit with a computer for 8 hours, and so I went and completed another degree, and that was the teaching part. I did have to go and teach actually kids, like real kids. So I was a teacher for a whole year, and I decided that I'd rather work with adults and deal with their whining rather than the kids themselves. So it's kind of like landed in between. And from there, I moved to the States and worked in companies like IBM, Oracle, um, and Comcast for 9 years. And I think the Comcast years for 9 years were mostly that we're going to talk about here, and obviously what I do now, because I worked as a senior program manager. So I work with companies and freelancers all through 9 years to kind of oversee and design training, but there was so much work that we couldn't do it internally. And so I basically met every single vendor probably that we have in the States in those 9 years.
Oh, wow. And so that kind of leads you to where you are today, where you are focusing on more of the data and the research. And your latest interest is, tell us the name of your article. Do you have that finalized?
Yes, it's something about how to become a social designer or becoming a learning designer. Um, this this whole article started about 6 months ago or so, when I started seeing these questions online in very different forms, like LinkedIn or Facebook groups or Twitter, about so many teachers want to move and shift into instructional design, and how they describe this moment of opening a new word is that it's like a parallel door to the universe that they've been teaching forever, and there's this whole world in social design they never knew of, and it looks exactly like their world, but it's kind of different. And they're getting excited about this tools and everything that we have that they never had, and how it could be used in different ways. And then they try to find their way into the adult world. And I have to say, before we talk about anything else, that there's, I think, two different worlds for in social design. One is higher ed, and then the one is workplace learning, like corporate and that sort of thing. I've never been into higher ed. I know people work there, but it's just such a different environment that all I know and I've been to and work with is and my experience is in the corporate world and the actual messy workplace learning.
Oh, yeah. And that's mostly our audience are people who want to get into workplace learning or corporate instructional design too. So you're in good company.
Yeah, so the idea was to give some simple, I don't know, a summary of, hey, what you should know about this thing of instructional design or learning design or whatever the title is. And here's some steps, and here's some resources, because I am not, anymore holding the gate of the truth or something. Then I have the key. I just know a lot of people, and I've seen a lot of things. I try to like have one place when people go in and see from end to end. So starting point of, hey, this is interesting. Where do I start? All the way through interviewing, some of the questions you might get, or things that even after you're getting how you might run into in workplace design. And then that was my starting point of a goal. And I quickly ran into a lot of barriers when I started researching this.
And barriers such as all the requirements that are needed for job application assets, like those kinds of barriers or other barriers?
Um, I think mental barriers of what am I writing about? Because first of all, the first thing I saw was just looking at job descriptions, because that's when looking at job descriptions. And what I noticed that there are so many different titles that are out there, and the job descriptions don't really match exactly what the titles are in one place versus in another. So there's instructional designer, ISD in the old ways, learning designers, the learning experience designers, there's learning consultants, and then all the dev part, and then now we have learning engineering and all kind of learning things out there. So that was like the first like stop of, am I writing to one of these group or two or all, or like who's my audience here?
Yeah. What'd you narrow it down to?
I could not narrow it down to. So here's what I did. I tried to come up with a chart that, in some ways at least, explains what these titles mean. Not as a taxonomy of, oh, here's your industry standard way of defining these things, but more like, if you're into learning of anything in the adult world, then you actually have some basic things, fundamentals that you need to know. And then after that, you need to have some kind of interest. And that interest might lead you to one way or another. And this is where this chart comes in of whether you really into the brain and how people learn and the science, reading articles and research. Some others are less worried about reading research itself, but just tell me what to do and how, because I want to do it. I'm more like a practitioner part. Some people want to do all the way from design to development. Others just develop. So I tried to come up with this interest chart of where's your interest before you even apply for jobs. Where's your interest? And what those elements mean. What are those like factors that you might want to see if you want to make sure that you have a future. But it all start with the basics, and then from there, kind of like a T-shaped approach of basics, and then kind of find your way into one of these T-shaped depths. It's kind of much easier to see actually than describing. I just realized.
Yeah. Was there 4 different categories? Or I remember learning engineer, and I remember making a comment something like, "Oh, it's got all the levels are, the highest there. I want to be one of those." But that's not how that chart works.
No, so it's a very colorful chart. You'll see that, but it's about, I think, like 5 of them. So I started with the traditional ID and ISD. So that's like one column, instructional designer and instructional systems designer. And then the next one was the learning experience designer. Learning designer is out there now. I see that more generic, so that's another one there. And then we have the learning consultant kind of titles like I have. Then we have just the developers, the learning developers, and the learning engineer was the last one.
Yeah. And the learning engineer, that's more of the research and the neuroscience and that end of the spectrum. Is that, remember that right?
Yeah, so I had a lot of misconceptions, I have to admit, about the learning engineering thing, because it sounds really cool. So I thought of this, like, picture this engineer learning kind of thing. I had no clue about what exactly behind this. So I had to track it down, and that's why it took a long time to write the article. I had a great conversation with Ellen Wagner. She has a great article. She's kind of leading the research on just finding and defining these things. I learned a lot about the background of how this discipline or part of our disciplines started and what's the aim for. But it sounds like something, which is the most exciting thing about it or interesting, is that it's not something that's coming from learning. It's actually coming from outside of learning, um, and kind of like starting from the engineering part and applying science. It is not what it sounds like, I think, for people. It is not just the research part, but also the kind of like intersection of learning science, engineering, discipline, and data. So you can have this holistic picture of what you're designing for learning, but also kind of like the science-based, evidence-based approach, and supported by data. So it sounds complex for me, but I love it because this is actually what I do. Like, I have both sides, so maybe I should be a learning engineer at some point.
It's a way cooler title than learning consultant, I gotta tell you. No, that's good. And so I imagine that, all right, so I've narrowed down based on your very informative chart that, I want to become an instructional designer. I want to get those base level skills that you probably lay out. And what does that look like?
So in this chart, in my article, actually I split the article into 2. It's a 2-part now because there's just so much information in it. And the first part deals with these titles and what's behind them, what's your interest. And before you get to the actual interest part is the basic layers. And I think the basic fundamental part is just you have to, no matter where you go and which way you go, you need to understand learning science. So you don't basically waste time, resources, and money. But that's kind of the theory of learning. And it goes down to closer and closer to like more practical and reality. And the lowest layer is kind of the implementation, the workflow. Because one thing that I've learned in the last decade is that this industry has been talking about our big change of how we shifting from course creation, content creation to more like making impact. But I've seen these articles about the future of learning for the last decade. And I think now, when this whole like pandemic and everything's going on, is just an accelerator of that trend. and it needs to happen sooner or later, because if I always say that if your job is to fill templates, that's going to be replaced by AI very soon, by tomorrow. That doesn't need another person to do that. Source information from all over, creating documents, creating courses based on templates, that's the easiest thing to automate.
Yeah. Yeah. It's about the, being able to, you think it's easy to automate just gathering in sources?
I would say so that the easy automation is to replace a bad course,
Yeah.
because we spend time and effort into creating something that either nobody's taking or there's just too much information in it. There's no actionable items, and we spend our time and energy of creating something that's not working. And then what we kind of tell the business is that that's what we're here for, to wait for the last moment when somebody says we need training and I need it tomorrow. So my article is kind of going through this change of what to do with this aspect of order taking. Because when you're new and you want this job, you're going to be excited that you landed on your instructional design job, that you want to please everyone. But actually, this job starts with asking questions, asking the right questions. And sometimes those questions are not easy to ask. If all you do is just really fill in the orders, then you end up with this bucket of you're going to be all brought to the table in the last moment, and there's no time at that point to change it. So it's an interesting exciting time to start as an instructional designer or any learning professional, because you need to think beyond your courses, and yet you don't have the experience yet. So it's kind of like an exciting new world, I think, what's coming.
Yeah. And I just saw an article in Forbes that came out last week that said that corporate training, online learning, you know, professional development will all be done online and they'll never go back to the classroom. That's what they said, that they're just making those predictions right now.
We actually talked about the article among some of us, and the first reaction was check who wrote the article and what the agenda is. And you'll see that it's written by apparently someone who's actually selling online platforms. So whenever you read never, my brain always turns on to like, okay, what's the agenda here? Because you never say never. There's going to be in between, and it's nothing about the delivery method anymore. It is about the impact and efficiency of what you're doing, and that's why you need both learning science, busting all the myths that are out there about how you design them, but also you have to understand the restrictions and limitations and how the business works, because you can create the best course in the world that covers content. If that course is not used the right way or not needed by people on the job, they're not going to take time to review something for 30 minutes when they need an answer for 2 seconds. But at the same time, you need to work on those basic elements that they need, the fundamentals. So if you spend your time on the wrong things, then you're never going to be able to catch up, because you always feel like there's more content needed, more content needed.
Yeah. So what did you find? I'm sure you talked to a couple people. What did you find were some of uh, the the main misconceptions or places that maybe new instructional designers getting it wrong, or people trying to make that transition they need some illumination on? What did you find?
So you'll see in the article, I find great resources. Karen Noth has a great article on diving into more of the descriptions of jobs versus the titles, and some research, other research. So first, what I saw is the number one question always for people who want to get into this is how in the world, I almost said some non-HR appropriate word here. How in the world can I get into a job when it says entry level requires 2 and 3 years experience?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a question that I actually addressed all the way into the second one. So I'm not going to reveal the answer. You can read the article. But there is everything that in my article is an answer comes from problem solving. And when you problem solve, the I think the traditional like panic way is trying to find a solution for this request as fast as I can, so I can prove that I know, instead of take a step back and reframe the question and reframe the problem of why are they asking for these 2 and 3 years of experience. And then once you start digging into that, and the article helps you get through those steps, once you understand why they're asking for that, then you can come up with a different answer and a different way of approaching that. So kind of decoupling between the words of what they say and the kind of like the rubric, the measurement that they're looking for. Because the easiest way to measure whether you have an experience of or not is asking for a title for 2 years, but that's not what they mean by that.
Okay, so I promise that this podcast will not come out before your article. So you got to tell us what it is.
Oh, okay. All right. So then switch to like the simple solution. So again, the idea is that they're asking for a 2-3 years of experience. It's not because they want you to have a resume with 2-3 years for an enter position. What they wanted to make sure is that they hire someone, and they don't end up with wasting the recruiting fees, the resourcing, the onboarding, and everything. And it turns out this person is not capable of doing the job. And one way to measure that or risk that, mitigation risking, is to ask for the 1, 2, 3 years or whatever, how many years of title, assuming that if someone else took that risk already and this person went through that and has this, then somebody else took the risk, so now they can take it on. So that's one way to do that. If you do have the experience, it's great. But if you don't, the question is, what else can you show them that kind of answers to this 2-3 experience? And this is when I think changing the concept of looking at the problem, reframing it to a different perspective. How can you show the value or assurance what they're looking for? And so experience doesn't mean, again, the years of the title. What you can show them is show them what problems that you solved. What was the problem? How did you approach the problem? What you tried, what worked, what didn't, and what was the end result? And then you can, and that could be anything that, if you're studying right now, anything that you did for your thesis, for your research, for an internship, whatever that is, the more real life it is, the better. If you volunteer your time, like I did when I started, I ran the teacher parent organization's website for, I don't know, 5 years. And all I did was just walk to the PTO and I said, hey, here's what I can do. Let me know when you need me. And then 6 months later, they called me that, hey, are you still able to do that? And so like, fine, I learned it quickly and then do it for you. So all these things that you do outside that doesn't have a title of instructional designers, but it has problem solving, that's something to do with learning. You can use those and kind of rephrase that at the end, literally, to the recruiter or hiring manager, that if they just looking for a title, you don't have it. But if you're looking for someone who can show the value and who can show the experience in other ways, problem solving, then here's my portfolio, here's my background, and here's some way of how I think and how I would solve problems. Here's what I showed you that I can learn on my own. I'm proactive. I know what the industry is going. I know I have the tools because I did it all by myself. I have the determination and commitment. If you're looking for someone that you're safe because of the title, I'm not the one. But if you want me to, join your team and show what I can do for you, I'm the one. And so this is kind of like switching around a little bit of the experience part. Now you still have to talk to them. So the problem also starts with people, which is another part of my article. You need to know people. The easiest way to get into anywhere is through people and not through black boxes online or recruiters.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the network definitely helps. And I think that's also kind of like why the academy members, they do get experience opportunities in the academy, but it's because they build the proof. You know, the proof is in their portfolio and they have to write
Yep.
case studies about each of their assets that they load in there to show exactly what you said, that they know how to solve. problems and that they can think through their designs. So that's
Yeah,
great
so
advice.
portfolio is a big piece in mine as well. There's so many great resources on building portfolios, so you find this in the article. Um, but what I focused on is literally these elements of storytelling. Of what is your portfolio telling, and it has to be your story. And it might sound actually bad, but when a hiring manager recruiter is looking at resumes, I did this when we work with many freelancers. You think your resume is unique, but when you read 20 of them in a row, believe me, instructional designers do the same thing. They use the same models, ADDIE, blah, blah, blah. Tools are the same because they're industry standard. They complete the same type of projects, and it just sounds the same over and over and over again. I mean, the names are different, but it's just reading. It's hard to have someone stand out from there unless they have a portfolio. And a portfolio shows them not only what they did, and this is, I think, crucial, but how and why they did what they did. So if I see something online that has a storyline interaction, that crazy animation thing that they created could be a completely waste of time and could be the most elegant solution. I have no idea unless you tell me what you're trying to solve here. And sometimes, and this is where, again, some examples in the article, that sometimes a checklist that you created and you give the local PTO of here's how to use the site. If that works, put it on the side and say here's how to solve the problem without any courses or building other things. And that helps me and the recruiters understand how you think, not just what you do.
Yeah. What about that storytelling in your resume? You're saying that, the portfolio really is how you get that story across. Is there any way to include your story in your resume based like to make yourself stand out, or really it's a portfolio?
Um, I think the portfolio can then open the doors. The resume is the upfront. I don't know much about the resume itself. It feels like it all depends on what you like. Some people love when you just have thrown into the top of all the tools that you know and all the processes that you use, that sort of thing. And then that's how people scan. Others believe that it has to be like a timeline type of thing, colorful, who knows what. I think it all depends on who's the hiring manager. But once you get the portfolio is live, it's online, and you can. I mean, obviously, on a resume, you can write anything you want. You can twist, and you know that when you walk into one of those workshops, you can twist anything into a nice-looking sentence that sounds like you invented the Rubik's cube. Um, and that's fine, but then show me something that you actually did, and this is when the portfolio comes in.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, okay, so they need a resume, they need a portfolio. What were some of the other things that you advise them on? Obviously, experience, but maybe like rethinking how they're going to go about proving that experience. Was there anything else?
So there's a little side of the portfolio. So most people think about portfolio as the professional work that they put online to show that they can do it. But the passion projects on your portfolio is as important as the professional ones, because that's when you can show how you think, what you care about as a person, because people are not hiring an ID. It's not a number. They're hiring a person that they need to work with, and that's whether you're biased or not, or you're admitted or not. It helps to have a 360 understanding of who the person is, what it would look like, what it would feel like to work with this person. If you're creative, don't just say you're creative. Show something that's creative. And if you're not sure if it's like really border case, it's not your professional, put them into the passion part, because nobody's scrutinizing your passion project. What they say is like, well, this person learned special effects or whatever that is just because they were interested in. Okay, so they learn fast online on their own, so they can take a lot of away from the personal things, and you don't lose any. That's good because that's you. And at the same time, with a twist on it is, don't try to be someone else online just because it sells. as I always say, don't try to get the job being someone else, because you might actually get the job. And then what happens?
Very, very true. This is all sage advice for sure.
And then just to answer your question, so what else? The next part kind of delve into, okay, so you have a portfolio, you have a resume, open the door, you go for the interview. And through the interview, I see over and over again asking these questions from candidates is, I'm going to have to build something on the fly. They told me I'm going to have like 20 minutes or 10 minutes to build something. They will tell me the content or give me the content, that sort of thing. And so what shall I do? And so my advice on that is is think again why they're asking for you to do this. It is because they really want you to show on the fly that you can use the tool, if it's about like building something in storyline, for example. Um, or is it because that's how they work in real life, that SMEs give you, 70-page content, it's all important, and you need to come up with a solution. And so my advice is to actually don't just jump in and start building something and show your best thinking or way. Just simple tell them that is this exercise obviously is not realistic. In 20 minutes, we don't build things. We don't build solutions in 20 minutes. So I want you to understand that I can do either a great, demonstration of how I use the tool, or I can figure out a good solution or create a solution for a problem. But I need to know the assessment criteria. What is success looks like for you when I give you this piece of content? And so you basically force them to tell you how they're going to review this. What is their goal? And there are two reasons to that. One is if they're testing you of how you would work with SMEs, whether you're just an order taker and then you just jump in and build things, that's a good way to start, because that's what you would do anyway. And two is that if they really think that in 10 minutes you're going to build a course or content or something, and all you need is just content for it, then they might actually work this way. And if that's the case, then you might not want to get the job. Because you end up with basically in this machine, they're replacing people over and over again. All they do is just here's the content, quickly build something. And that's not what instructional design is about.
Yeah, we see a lot of different tests that Academy members have to go through to land their jobs, and sometimes it's full essays that they write to, explain their thinking process about a scenario that they're given.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's exactly what you said, where they want you to design a solution in 20 minutes. A lot of the times they want you to give a presentation on a part of their business
Mm-hmm.
or their values. And so those tests come in a lot of different forms.
Yeah.
Or
And and so this is where you need to think about your depth. Kind of back to the chart. If you're really strong in the development part, and you do want to do that, show your value and your storyline, captivate whatever your skills you have. And sometimes they send you homework, like send you a content, and you think about it. How would you redesign this? That sort of thing. Um, if you're serious about that job and you want to show, then you can actually take that or part of it, rebuild it, and send it back. Not just talk about it or create a presentation, but show them what you could do, literally, even just a part of it. What was the problem? How you solved it? And here's what I can build for you in 4 hours or something like that. And I think that shows more, for one. But only do that for the job that you really want. So don't do that like every single job that you're trying to apply to, because then you're going to waste your time. Or maybe not. Maybe you're building your portfolio as you're doing that. But make sure that you show and tell. So this is the storytelling part of telling things that you can do is one, showing how you do it and showing the value, that's a different one. That can basically help you to get inside.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the same for our learners too, right? We could tell at them or speak at them, or we can demonstrate and show. So this is really good. So, all right. So have you shared everything you want to share in your in your article, or have we missed anything?
There's going to be a lot of I think references because this is a topic that's covered all over. I think if you Google it, there's a lot of information out there, even actually too much, because you have to sift through of which one actually is valid, which one is more like a marketing thing. So I tried to, for each topic and each section, try to add a lot of extra resources that you can go and research and find. And I ended up with focusing on literally the one of the biggest problems once you get hired. So yeah, this is a great thing. You get hired, but that's not your destination. It's just a milestone, huge milestone, but it's a milestone. And from there, you have to start working. And that's when I think one of the most common issues that you might face is the subject matter expert and their 40-page deck of important thing. What do I do with that? I can't create a course out of that. It doesn't fit, that sort of thing. So I'll give you a little bit around that as well of how do you approach that? What are the ways to cut it down and make it more impactful? And it's more like your future once you get hired, kind of over the beyond the hiring.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, so now you've done all this research. You are sharing with people who want to find a place to like get started in this field. So based on all your years of experience and your current article and all that other information that you have, tell us what is your best and final tip for those who want to become idols.
So it's I call it the PowerPoint VPT. Nothing to do with the actual application, but it's PNT. So people, processes, and tools. The network of people, and there's actually more in-depth conversation in the article about how to find the right people and how to find the right network and how to network. That's one. The other one is processes. You need to understand how instructional design, tools, processes, models work, and then what tools you need. And those three, I think, gives you kind of like a 360 best approach from each kind of leg, a three-stool leg, as a starting point to get an instructional design, learning design, or whatever design job, and move from there.
That's wonderful. So where do you want people to find you? Do you want them to go to your website or check you out on LinkedIn, or how can people connect with you?
So I live on anywhere and everywhere. So if you find me anywhere, say hi. You can connect me on LinkedIn. That's the easy one, I think, for the professional one. On Twitter, you can find me on Twitter as Rabbit or Rag. I'll send you the hashtag because you need to spell it. But we participate on Thursdays on LRN Chat. If you're interested in or just want to lurk on Twitter, come on Thursday. It's at 7:30 Eastern Time. So basically, we have a topic that we discuss live throughout this Twitter feed. And if you want to meet me or ask any questions, I belong to several of the instructional design group on Facebook. And I always happy to just give you one-off answers to think if it's easy, or just give you some people's names that are much better to answer those questions. So I'll happy to connect with anyone.
Thank you so much for joining us and being a part of our Idol network. And I really appreciate just the chance to meet and chat with you.
Thank you so much, Robin, and good luck to everyone who's out there hunting for jobs.
Thank you so much for listening. You can find the show notes for this episode at idlecourses.com. If you like this podcast and you want to become an instructional designer and online learning developer, join me in the Idle Courses Academy, where you'll learn to build all the assets you need to land your first instructional design job, early access to this podcast, tutorials for how to use the e-learning authoring tools, templates for everything course building, and paid instructional design experience opportunities. Go to idlecourses.com/academy and enroll or get on the wait list. Now get out there and build transcendent courses.